Hello, I'm Lisa Rose. I am the Festival Director for Queer Screen. First off, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land of where we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded in Australia. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to this exciting interview that I'm about to do with the writer-director of Milkwater. So I'm going to bring her on right now.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
In Australia. Well,
I wish I was in Australia.
Yeah, it's pretty nice down here at the moment. All right, well, let's kick off. I've got a bunch of questions to ask you because I'm a huge fan of your film. I think it's just really fantastic, fantastically written, directed and performed American indie. It's a really nice balance of comedy and drama as well. And so congratulations.
Thanks so much.
So I believe the idea originally came to you when you were in college, but it changed a lot from the initial idea that you had. Can you talk a little bit about what the initial idea was and how it changed?
Yeah, for sure. So I've always been really interested in the idea of surrogacy. So the script that I wrote in college was about a young woman who ends up being a surrogate for a couple through an agency, and then the couple died and she needs to figure out what to do. And I had it was the first feature I ever wrote. It sat on my shelf for a long time. And then probably like 7 or 8 years, I went back to it and I was like, I think there's something here. But as soon as I started researching surrogacy law, it became very clear that, you know, there are 85 stopgaps put in place. So it would almost never really be up to the surrogate to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't really want to write a legal drama as my first feature, but at that point, I'd been living out as a queer person for years and years. And I was like, you know, I had spent a lot more time sitting with the idea that it was very likely that in creating family for myself, you know, there's always going to have to be a third person in that relationship if you're, you know, with someone who you can't biologically reproduce with. And so I was like, okay, well, there could be something there. And so how would two people end up in an arrangement like this who weren't necessarily friends beforehand, but also didn't meet through an agency because so much of the complication arises out of the fact that they don't have a contract in place. So that was kind of where I started on the rewrite. And then I spent a long time writing the script, and probably a year after I'd started rewriting it, I had a big sit down read with some of my very kind friends who either came to give notes or read the characters. And then after that, and some great feedback from that session, I rewrote probably about half of it.
Okay. So it's interesting because obviously the character of Milo, fabulously played by Molly Bernard, is, you assume, heterosexual. And so she's just completely surrounded by queer people. Like, they're just, I mean, there are other straight people in the film, but was it always the intention to have the protagonist be straight or like assumed straight?
You know, not necessarily, but once I started developing it, I thought that was it kind of lent a little bit to Milo's like entitlement and ignorance in a way, because I think she's someone who wants to have the world figured out so badly that I felt like it would lend an interesting angle to it if she felt like she had some ownership over her friend's queer identity, which also makes her feel like she knows enough to get into this arrangement with a queer man, but she's never actually lived that life. And so I thought that was just an interesting rub, particularly with her relationship with George and her relationship with Noor.
Yeah. And it is interesting because it's like the start of the film was almost like a rom-com, but it's not. It's not a rom-com. But just sort of some beats and things and just kind of the tone and stuff. So that's a really like interesting thing. And also just, you know, it's not the norm to have you know, so many queer people in a film where there's a straight protagonist, and the queer people are the ones who, you know, are the drama queens.
Yeah, are like
So that's so thank you for that. That was very good.
Good.
And so I'm assuming that, and obviously the characters as well, all those extra characters, were also fully fleshed out. Like they weren't, tokens and
I did not want that.
Yeah, because it's so important, because it's just so often, it would just, like the George character, for instance, like so often that character would just be there to
the sassy gay friend who lends advice and doesn't have any backstory or life of his own.
Yeah. So that was really great that you had that. So the cast itself. So can you talk a little bit about the casting? Because you got such a fantastic cast together for your first feature.
Yeah, absolutely. So our casting director was Matt Glassner, who's amazing. And he was brought together through our executive producer, Ash, who unfortunately passed away this year unexpectedly, and was a huge advocate of queer filmmaking, queer youth. He's just the best human being. So he had a big hand in that. And Matt just had some great instincts. Molly was actually probably our only casting that was like my initial idea. A good friend of mine is a writer director in LA and had worked as the script coordinator on Transparent. Right. And Molly plays the younger version of Judith Light in that show. And my friend Lauren was like, you need to look at Molly Bernard. She's amazing. She's incredible on set. She's great to work with. And like, I think her star is on the rise. And she was like, I think you need a lead who can like seamlessly handle the transition between comedy and drama.
Yeah.
And I had never watched Younger before, so I binge watched that, and totally, Molly was not really who I had in mind for Milo. I was imagining her being a little bit more one-dimensional, honestly, and much more like middle finger to the air. And as soon as I started imagining Molly in that role, I was like, I actually think this is much more interesting. She's a lot more neurotic and sardonic, and so then at that point we'd started casting for Roger, and I thought that Molly and Patrick Breen, who plays Roger, would be a really good foil for one another, because they both have that kind of, they can have a little bit of that manic New York energy.
Yeah.
And I thought it was particularly important that the match of those two characters, it was important to me that Roger didn't come off as being like predatory, because that's a lot to ask. So it was really important to me to not cast like a 22-year-old in that role. And I wanted to cast an actress who I knew could like stand up to that, and where we believe that Roger wasn't just taking advantage of her or the situation.
Yeah, which totally comes across. I mean, it's, he's the one trying to set boundaries, and she's the one that is just going
steamrolling over them. Yeah.
I don't know what boundaries are. I'm just gonna
show up my life. Yeah.
And so obviously, she obviously the character of Milo just kind of jumps in and just makes this incredibly rash decision, and so. Obviously, she didn't. I think Molly didn't do any research at all, because she wanted to just be like, I'm just gonna this is what this person would do. So obviously, I'm assuming you would have done a lot of research. In Australia, like surrogacy laws are very different from in the US. Like a lot of couples who do surrogacy will actually go to the US to do it, because here you can't exchange money in any, like, you can,
wow, that's so
only, I think, I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can only, like, depends on per state, but I think you can only like pay for the medical bills, and that's it.
Wow.
And we don't have huge medical bills for a lot of things anyway.
Yeah.
Universal healthcare. I know, we're funny. So I don't know where my question was going, but it was kind of the lines of, she jumps in, and you kind of see her sort of progression throughout the film of like wanting to be in Roger's life, but it's kind of almost like she wants to be in Roger's life, but whether there was ever any version where it was more about the child's life, because it didn't really seem in the film that there was much thought of Milo's character about, I've just given birth to a biological child that I'm potentially never going to see again.
Totally. I pretty intentionally wanted it to be such that she's so not preoccupied with the baby that it's kind of jarring. Because I think that the baby is so not the hole that she's trying to fill. Like, I think she just wants to be the most important person to someone else right now. And even though you could say that would be the case about a baby, I don't think a baby is going to like give her the feedback that she wants.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, I have not had children yet, but I also wanted to write a movie where there was a female protagonist who was pregnant, who wasn't entirely consumed by like this emotional attachment to a baby.
Yeah.
Just because I think there are so many women who give children up for adoption or are surrogates, and I think that's a really wonderful thing to do. And not to say that they're not emotionally attached to their children, because certainly so many of them are, but I just didn't want all of a sudden the like shift to be that like now she's so preoccupied with this child, because I think there are plenty of women who that's not necessarily the journey that they go through.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you do see it like where there's this moment like when, you know, Roger wants her to hold the baby and she's like,
no.
And it's like this thing where it's like this moment of like, yeah, I can't deal, which, you know, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could be.
No, I don't think I could either, which I certainly thought about plenty of times while we were making it. And our crew all, we had an entirely female department headed crew. Yeah. And we all tried on the pregnancy belly while we were shooting, and it was freaked pretty much everyone out.
I can imagine. It's one of the benefits of being a queer woman is that you can meet someone and they can have the baby. So
yeah, exactly.
Which is what I did. My wife had a baby, so I'm like, yes.
That's both worlds.
There's benefits to being queer.
Exactly.
Just also to the casting. So obviously the random job that Milo has in a music store that seems to have way too many staff for the number of customers that they have. But the three Australians, like was that just circumstance, or was it?
No, that's how I wrote them. I worked at I have gone to and then worked at a summer camp in Maine for 17 years of my life in different periods of time. And we work with a company called CCUSA that's like an international placement agency. And so many Australians work at camp. Like I'm lucky enough to have a ton of friends in Australia now. But for years there was just like this collection of like 5 guys from Australia who came back like every summer for like 8 years. And it's normally like a 1-year thing to like see America. So it was like, is this like you're working your whole life around like being able to come here for 3 months in the summer? And they're all awesome. But the amount of time I spent subjected to that particular banter was like, I was like, one day you're going in a movie.
So did you actually cast were they Australian actors, or their accents were pretty good if they weren't?
2 of them are actually Australian. One, Sean Rogers, who he's the white guy with kind of blonde shaggy hair. He's not Australian, but has a killer accent. And then Nicholas Hyatt, who is the skinnier white guy, is Australian and has just recently moved back. And then Alexander Hodge, who's the Japanese actor, is also Australian, and he's in Insecure, the HBO show with Issa Rae. He's Molly's love interest in that show. So he's awesome. He's LA and New York based now, but he is originally from Australia. And he said that's the only time he's ever gotten to do his real accent in a movie.
No, well, it was a very convincing accent, so I'm not surprised that he was Australian.
A lot of that set dressing was brought to set by the actors who were stoked about it. So good. We had a lot of Aussie flags.
Excellent. Represent. So you like obviously it's been a very weird 12 months for the world, and so what premiere was it? Brooklyn Film Festival? Is that where
we ended up, it's kind of a weird thing because we were supposed to premiere at the Atlanta Film Festival, and then they moved their dates because I think our literal premiere was supposed to be like April 2nd. It was like right there. So they moved their dates, and then we ended up premiering at Brooklyn and showed it at Atlanta later that month virtually.
Have you managed to have any physical screenings that you've been able to go to? Oh, that's so sad.
Such a bummer. I know. I also feel like the festival circuit is supposed to be such a like, you know, the like light at the end of the tunnel. So it's certainly been disappointing to not get to go to any in person. There was a cool festival called Lighthouse International, which is in Jersey, right near New York, and they did a drive-in movie theater. So a bunch of my friends went in my car and we got to watch that from the trunk. So that was kind of fun. I mean, I super respect what all the festivals have done. It cannot have been easy for festivals to go virtual either. So we've gotten to do some cool Q&As and stuff like that. And the silver lining is that, you know, many more people in my friends and family circle have been able to see the movie online and virtual festivals than would have if we had been just doing in person.
Yeah, and it's certainly a film that kind of, because we're obviously doing one physical screening and having it online as well, but it's a film that really lends itself to be able to watch it online, because it seems to be that, you know, we did a festival in September where we played, most of the films were online, and the feedback was people just want to watch films that, you know, have some humor in it. And
Totally.
This film certainly does. So in terms of your... this being your first feature, like how was life on set? Like, was it, had you made a lot of shorts before that, or was it kind of you were dropped in it and like?
I'd made 2 shorts since graduating from college. I graduated in 2013. But I'd worked for production houses, or not like I'd worked for like digital ad agencies. So I'd been on set, but not really in charge of like putting together my own crew. So this was definitely the largest undertaking I have been a part of by far.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. It was a hard shoot in a lot of ways because we had so many bars, and we couldn't afford to shut down a bar, so we had to shoot overnights on all of those. So that was like 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 1 a.m. to 1 p.m. So those were some punishing days, but our department heads were just amazing, and working with an entirely female-headed crew was like just a really incredible experience. I mean, a lot of us still work together. My DP Maria and I just shot together this week. And she's become a good friend. And Candace, my producer, and I are very, very close friends. So that, I mean, I think the trust everyone had in each other made it a much better experience. And I certainly try to operate by the like ethos of try to treat your crew as well as you can. And then when you can't call in a favor every day. So when you do need to ask them to work another half an hour, people are happy to stick around because they feel like you generally treat them with respect and value their time. So that made things go a lot smoother. And yeah, I mean, it was a small crew. I think there were only 15 of us every day.
And how long was the shoot?
It was 21 days over 4 weeks in October. Yeah, so I think we did 5 days, 5 days, 6 days, 5 days. Yeah, but it was tough because we were never on a location for more than 2 days. So there was a ton of packing up and moving around. Molly was a huge trooper because, I mean, she is in every single scene and she has so much dialogue, and she needed to be, you know, sitting in hair and makeup at 1 a.m. But yeah, I mean, also I encourage everyone to think critically about casting, because for that much dialogue, if we hadn't had such a capable actor, we wouldn't have made our days. But, you know, the fact that she could get through a take, you know, in 2 or 3 takes, we'd have so much usable footage, made a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. Like, well, if you like could go back in time, like, is there a thing that you like learned that you were like, I wish I knew that before I started shooting?
Definitely. Me and my producer had like a wine and cheese sit down with our department heads after we wrapped, and just were like, everything we want to know. If we had another $10,000, if we had another $50,000, what would you have wanted to spend it on? And it was so helpful. And the biggest takeaways were kind of surprising to me, but then they're kind of minute. But one was get a production office, like rent a space for the month leading up to production, just so that there's a consolidated space to work out of, and the department heads can talk about ordering, and things just can be discussed beforehand as opposed to on set. So I thought that was a really good piece of advice. This is more specific to our movie, but having a separate locations manager, I think I would have hired going back, so it wasn't all on our producer, because we had so many locations. With getting agreements signed and picking up keys and stuff like that, we really needed a dedicated person. And then it seems so like bougie, but honestly, I would have paid for stand-ins going back, because just with hair and makeup, it takes like 2 hours. And that's the time when the crew is setting up. And so we always would need crew to stand in. And it's just like, you need someone with the same complexion, approximately the same height. And if you're pulling your first assistant camera to go stand in, then, you know, they can't do their actual job. So I think I would have, I think I would have ended up paying dedicated extras to be stand-ins for our shoot, at least for half the time when we had like all 4 or 5 characters in the same scene, it would have been really helpful. So those are kind of particular, but those are like my production takeaways. And then I don't know how this is in Australia versus the US, but we had all of our paperwork very much in order, but people just suck sometimes. And we had the cops threaten to be called on us multiple times. And like, we're so worried about that at the beginning. And I would just tell anyone not to worry about it. Like, because for things that are about location agreements, like they just don't have the capacity to shut you down. So keep filming.
Yeah. No, people like to put their noses in where they don't need to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of the film itself, like what is it that you would really like people to sort of take from it? Like what is it like a lesson? Like obviously not every film has a lesson, sometimes it's just brain off. That's a good question. But is there a thing where you're like, I want people to go away and think about X?
I think just that like you can make a bad decision and still be a good person, you know, or that like even life defining decisions, you know, like I guess my moral is that like the moral is always a little bit more complex than like and people are more complex than like this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, this is a good person, this is a bad person, and we're all just trying to like do the best we can to keep on learning and growing. And then I think the other big thing I wanted to do is just make a movie where there were a lot of queer people and not just one type of queer person, and where people weren't like, I always want to make movies where queer characters are maybe informed by their queerness, but not defined by it. Like I'm lucky enough to live in a time where I don't necessarily have to make the coming out movie, you know, and I really wanted us to be able to see George, Noor, and Roger as 3 people who are kind of at different points in their life cycle as a queer person navigating different things. But, you know, they're struggling with things as humans. Like George is struggling with dating as a human being. Noor is struggling with being young in her marriage as a person. And Roger is probably struggling the most by like a queer defined problem, and that he, in desperately wanting to have a child, but that also felt right for his generation. So I guess just showing a myriad array of queer people in life is important to me.
Well, I'm certainly going to be watching your career because I love this film. So have you got anything that you're kind of working on at the moment? Like, I should imagine you're writing, because what else can you be doing when you're locked in?
Yeah, I have been writing. I'm set to direct a movie that we don't know when it's going to happen yet because of COVID, but I actually didn't write it. It's called Thruple, and it's about a young man who finds himself in a relationship with a married couple of men and navigating through that. And then I'm writing a fun movie with a friend right now that's a queer Christmas movie that is...
They seem to be all the rage this year.
I know. I feel we're behind on this, but this one is supposed to be a funny romp where everyone in the restaurant is gay.
Oh, yeah. But look, there's been a bazillion heterosexual Christmas movies.
I know.
We have a lot to catch up on. There's
exactly.
Just
keep making them. Bring them on. The more the better.
And the good thing about those is that people watch them every year, and it's got longevity.
Yeah, I'm not. The process of bringing an independent feature through from creation to sales yourself has been worthwhile for this movie, but not something I want to go on my own again. So if the next movie is like a more commercial gay Christmas movie, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, good, excellent. Well, I hope that comes to fruition and that we get to see it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to throw to the trailer. So if this talk has convinced people to watch the film, I'm sure the trailer will. Thank you, Morgan.
Awesome.
You know how when you're out drunk with friends and someone's like, oh, we should all go camping, and another person is like, yeah. And then you wake up the next morning with the idea that just like totally lost its magic and it never ends up happening?
What?
I'm thinking of becoming a surrogate.
A surrogate what?
Like mother.
For who?
That guy we met at the bar the other night, Roger.
Have you been to Thigh High?
Yes, the gay bar?
That's my bar.
We have PBR, picklebacks, and Sunset Surprise.
Ooh, what's the Sunset Surprise?
It's a surprise that looks like a sunset.
feel like I can do something good and real for him, like now.
Never have I ever shown up at a stranger's drag show.
Would we call me a stranger? I'm but a spinsterly old maid who has yet to use these plentiful hips for a single babe.
Are you serious?
George! I'm pregnant.
What are you even talking about? This is insane.
Somebody woke up on the wrong ear of the dingo.
Again.
Okay, that is not a real idiom. I don't believe anything you say anymore.
So after this 4 or 5 months and it's done?
No, I think I'll be more like a non-denominational godparent, like a not religious to spiritual parent.
I can tell you the sex today if you want to know.
Oh my God, wonderful.
No, I don't really want to know.
You are incapable of listening unless you're told exactly what you want to hear.
Hello, what are you doing here?
I was just stopping by on my way home from work. I wanted to ask you about...
Now is not a good time. I am allowed to have a life that doesn't involve you.
So I'm just your surrogate? Do you ever feel like you've already experienced the most intense version of like every emotion you'll ever feel?